go, folks. GameCritics.com podcast number 33. I'm your delightful host, Tim Spaeth. Let's say hello to the cast, starting with our founder and owner, Chi Kong Liu. Hi, Chi.
Hey, Tim. What's up, guys?
Great to be back with you. Also joining us, Brad Gallaway.
Hey, gentlemen.
And pinch hitting at the 11th hour for the missing Mike Bracken, who has other more important business this evening. Welcome back to the show, Mr. Richard Nyack.
Gute Nacht, gentlemen.
Great to have you, sir. Now, I keep meaning to say this, and I'm a terrible host, I'm a terrible person, but something I'm very proud of is that we are one of the only video game podcasts, if not the only video game podcast, to provide a written transcript of our show for the hearing impaired. And the transcripts are prepared by our colleague Tara Kirk, who is also a game reviewer and just a fantastic person who does these transcripts in her free time, completely free of charge. And so I just wanted to thank Tara and remind people that those transcripts are out there. I think she probably spends as much time transcribing the show as we do preparing and recording it. Major, major props to Tara. So just want to remind you, you can find those transcripts at GameCritics.com right along with the episodes at the podcast link. So our thanks to Tara.
Absolutely, thanks to Tara, because I don't know if you guys have ever transcribed anything, but I have.
Yeah.
And man, it is like the most painful, tedious, hateful thing I've ever done. So I'm just blown away that Tara does it for free every time we do one of these shows. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Tim, and major props to Tara.
Absolutely. I'm going to edit in applause here because she certainly deserves it. So thanks again to Tara. Let's move on to our show. Our big topic this week, the art, yes, I said art, of storytelling in games. But first, I thought we would read a letter from our mailbag. We haven't done this in a while, so I have Felipe here, my assistant. He has reached into the mailbag, pulled out a letter. He's handed it to me. Thank you, Felipe. I appreciate that. You smell great today, by the way, Felipe. What is that fragrance? White Diamonds. That's the Liz Taylor perfume. Well, you smell great.
Felipe's got expensive taste.
No, it's actually, I think that's like a Target fragrance. It's like $19 at Target.
Oh, well, shows you how much I know about perfume.
Why do I know that exact price? Anyway, here's the letter. Let's read it. For God's sakes, let's move on. This letter comes from Husker75. Probably not his real name. He writes, "We are all sick of Roger Ebert's declaration that games will never be considered art." He's at it again. "Nevertheless, as the Internet's preeminent defenders of games as art, I would appreciate your take on the latest Ebert controversy. Thanks very much. P.S. It would be awesome if you guys could do a segment on Microsoft Game Room. Preferably make it at least 45 minutes long." Well, interesting. Okay. We'll come back to that second part, but let's talk about Roger Ebert. And Chi, I'm going to pass it over to you. And we talked a bit before the show. You had something of a unique take on this, maybe that our listener maybe buried the headline, missed the point a bit.
It's not so much that the letter writer missed the point. It's as he said, this isn't the first time Ebert has made this proclamation that games aren't art. What was kind of funny about the way he did it this time was that he had somebody in either a reader or something refer him to Kelly Santiago, the one of the founding partners from that game company, that created the lovely game Flower, and she did this whole what was it, guys? It was like a little.
It was a conference speech that she gave, yeah.
Yeah, she gave a conference and made an impassioned plea about the moving on from that argument about whether games are art. That games are art. So, and rather than it was bizarre because Ebert said he liked her, he thought she was a good personality and charming, on, and then just proceeded to just troll every single thing she said and just rip her to shreds, and just really made some of the most ignorant and bizarre comments, which was unfortunate for me. As people at the website, the Game Critics know, I'm a big fan of Siskel and Ebert. Siskel's death was what inspired the creation of GameCritics.com, and I've always admired Ebert as a sort of a progressive-minded hero, and just everything he wrote just sort of just shattered that. I mean, it just really just a lot of ignorant, wrong-headed statements. But before we get into some of the grisly details, I guess I want to hear what you guys have to say about it first.
I agree with you, Chi. I used to hold Ebert in really high esteem. He's done a lot of things in film. I mean, he's been one of the preeminent voices that I look to. He's up there in terms of film criticism, and I think he's done just so much for film. But I just am really shocked at the level of, like you said, the trollishness that he's behaved with in this issue. I mean, for someone who is unarguably, an intelligent, well-spoken, respectable individual, I can't believe the level that he's stooped when it comes to games. I mean, it's almost like, looking at Martin Luther King. I mean, Martin Luther King is someone who everyone looks up to. But if Martin Luther King, if he was still alive, turned around and said, well, I hate Jews, that would pretty much shatter everybody's image of Martin Luther King, So to me, for Ebert to be a defender and a proponent of film for all these years, to turn around and say, you know what, games are not art, they're never art, and people who like games suck, basically. It totally undoes like all the respect and all the admiration I had for him. And honestly, I mean, I'm just hating on the guy right now. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, and so some of the things that he said were just like he came off like a complete fascist. I mean, he basically or like those media watchdogs that complain about music having certain profanities or destroying our culture, and then they never listen to the song, but they're like, well, don't you think you have to listen to the song so that you know what they're talking about? Oh no, I don't have to listen to it. I've heard people talk about it, and so that's how I've formed my judgment, and that's what Ebert's basically saying.
Totally.
And I think it's just something along the lines that he just doesn't understand, like how he doesn't understand how gaming has evolved over the years, and he still sees it as something like this little kiddie thing, I guess.
Well, the thing that really stumps me is he's such a smart guy. And granted, he's old. And whenever you get old, if you don't keep that young at heart spirit within you, I mean, you're going to crustify. You're going to get like all cranky and crotchety. And, you have to kind of actively work at staying young at heart and being open to new things. I mean, just as kind of an example of that, I mean, I just was watching the news the other day, and there's like a 99-year-old lady who just got an iPad, and she loves it. She's like going through it and learning the features. So that's a really great example of somebody who, is from an older generation and is able to, at least try to stay current and be open to new things. I mean, in terms of Ebert, it's like he doesn't even want to be open to the possibility that there might be something there. And for someone so well-spoken and so well-read to take that attitude is shocking to me. Like, it really is just shocking, because really intelligent people will admit when they don't know something. And it's very clear to anybody who's listening to this argument and what he's written that he doesn't know jack shit about games. And rather than say that, or rather than even saying, I don't know enough to comment, or I don't think they are, but I haven't done enough research, the way that he's just trolled off into the stratosphere has just completely turned me off. And I was just going to say, I mean, to me, it's almost to the point of like ruining his legacy, because now everything he says and has said is colored by this now. And it just has ruined my image of him.
We've said many times on this show that a major deterrent to games becoming accepted in higher circles of culture and society and art is time. And I think this is a perfect example of this. Old people have to die, and we have to become the old people, and then this problem goes away. Ebert is not alone in his opinion, and this is really just a cycle, though, isn't it? I mean, a few generations ago, critics were defending film as art, and 50 years from now, there will be some crazy new telepathy-based media that we won't understand, and we'll be the crazy old people who are out of touch. I mean, this has all happened before. It will all happen again. It's just that Ebert's on the podium right now. But
I think to what I agree with what Brad was saying, how shocking it was, is just because I never thought he was that guy. You would think from his previous writing and from his knowledge of film, because really this is the most shocking part. The history of film mirrors that of video games almost near identically. I mean, when at the origins of films, it was nothing more than a little, game and special effect, and it's evolved to what it is now. So that's what's just particularly upsetting about it,
And there was a recent Penny Arcade that I think absolutely nailed it, because the first panel, it just says it's the job of young people to make things which old people despise. It's the job of old people like Roger Ebert to denigrate the work of the young. That is the system. Someday we will hate them ourselves.
I hope I don't become that guy, but yeah, maybe
I hope
that's unavoidable.
We will all become that guy. It is a cycle. I have no doubt that we will all become that guy. We got an email, though, that I wanted to quote because it's very eloquent, and it's from Malik G. I won't give the full name because I don't know that he wants us to, but he sent you an email, Brad, which you were kind enough to forward to us, and I'll just quote a bit of it here. He says, quote, "To people like me, who have always grown up with video games present and a part of my life, the question of whether or not video games are art is an unasked one, unasked because it's taken as a given by me and by my peers." Ebert's comments gave me pause to question if, when, and whether video games are art, and for that I'm thankful, first and foremost. It's good for we who love video games to be challenged, not to be so insular and simply believe what we've always believed. And then he goes on to say that I don't believe I've been moved to tears by any game. I have certainly been awed by beauty and not just technical prowess, cheered in triumph and not just from completing a game, and challenged morally and intellectually. That definitely sounds like art to me. So again, that was Malik G. That's also his Twitter handle if you want to check out more of what he has to say, but we wanted to thank him for contributing that.
And can I just add also that what the whole point of Kelly Santiago's conference was that this really isn't an argument anymore. I mean, and I wrote about this subject in 2003, almost a decade ago by now. Well, seven years, but it's closing in on a decade. And while Malik makes a good point about not being too insular, but I think a lot of people have thought about this before, and and that's the issue, and I'm 100% with Kelly in that in that Ebert's just made himself completely irrelevant, and we just need to ignore him at this point and move on and just really worry about this topic as it is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying, with what Kelly was saying, and certainly with what Malik was saying. I mean, I think most of us who actually take the time to play games, unlike a certain film critic, it's like Malik said, it's not even an argument. Like, it's just known that, that argument was over a long time ago, and the only people still crying foul are people who don't spend any time playing games. And so obviously, why would we want to listen to what they say? I mean, you don't take restaurant reviews on steak from a vegetarian, and you don't take art reviews from a blind person. So why would you listen to Roger Ebert, his views about games? Because he simply doesn't play them and doesn't care to even investigate them. So I definitely think that the topic now is not whether or not they are games. I mean, they are. Period. They are. It's just for someone of his standing to take this kind of like really narrow-minded stance and to sound off so loudly. I mean, he's effectively, at this moment, the world's most powerful troll. I mean, he's got like millions of readers. He's got more troll power than like all the trolls on like NeoGAF combined or whatever. So I think that's really the issue, is that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. But when he can spout off and there's like all of America hears what he has to say. I mean, to me that's really the most offensive. I mean, it's kind of a crime that someone has a podium like that and he chooses to crap all over it.
And also to Ebert's comment about how like, why do we care what he has to, why do we care so much, or why do we care about what he has to say? I mean, come on. And like Mike says, come on, Raj, do we really need to answer that? I mean, that's just like, basically totally just shitting on our values and what we hold dear in life. I mean, it's not about the obvious thing is validation, but it's not just validation. I mean, do black people, protest civil rights because they want to be validated? That's part of it, but that's not the only reason. They're standing up for what they believe is right, and that's what a lot of these gamers are doing, and there's nothing wrong with that.
I do want to mention that we did ask Roger to join us on the podcast tonight so that he could defend his position, but, well,
It just kind of came out like...
No, now, hold on. Now, that's just not classy.
You know what, Tim? Ordinarily, I wouldn't take a shot like that because I'm not really into making fun of people's physical disabilities, but when someone says he's too well-read to know about video games, I call serious bullshit on that, so he earned that one.
Oh man,
And
we're all going to hell, man. We're all
No.
going to hell in a handbasket.
we are.
No comment.
All right. We have to take a break. Let's pause. When we come back, the art of storytelling. Stay with us. In 2004, developer Warren Spector stood before the Game Developers Conference and offered this challenge to the masses. He said, defend the quality of a single game story against that of your average B movie. No one took him up on the challenge. Now, here we are 6 years later, and I wonder if the response would be any different. I think it would be. And that is our topic tonight, the art of game storytelling. And game stories we love, the craft of developing characters, motivation, structure, narrative. Now, Richard, it's convenient that you're here tonight. You recently wrote a piece for the site entitled, Why Does Game Storytelling Have Such Low Standards? And I guess let's start there. Why does game storytelling have such low standards?
Well, the reason that I think that game storytelling has low standards is because more often than not, the story is a very secondary aspect of game design and game development and creation and so forth. Because just think about it. I mean, how often is the game defined by gameplay mechanics or aesthetic or just the subject matter? Well, not necessarily subject matter, but just that kind of stuff. And
Right.
I mean, a lot of times, just look at something like, God of War. I mean, what's the story? Kratos angry, roar. That's it. That's the story, and that's fine. That's all it needs. And I mean, just you look at other games. I mean, the story doesn't have to be, it's some epic tale of some sort, or even a good story for that matter, for it to be a good game. But what I did see, and this was inspired by me playing Heavy Rain and seeing get all kinds of praise for, you've advanced the art of storytelling in games so much. I'm like, no, you haven't. It's still a terrible story. So no, you don't.
In the article, you name-checked some games where you thought the story did work for you. Tell us about those, and more importantly, why you thought the story worked.
Well, a lot of those are, the ones I mentioned in the article. BioShock. It just does this great setting of the dystopia. Why it's a dystopia. What exactly happened there. Dragon Age. I mean, I've talked about Dragon Age before. I think it was my Game of the Year pick last year. It was just the most definitive kind of RPG story you could possibly ask for. Great characters, great background story, great epic sort of fantasy lore kind of thing. Aquaria is something that just does a very good job of weaving the story into gameplay without actually having to stop to take you out of gameplay to tell the story. I mean, it's something that kind of like the first Prince of Persia Sands of Time game did, where he's just kind of walking along and thinking to himself. Sometimes he's talking to what's the girl that I can't remember the name of the girl that's with him, but sometimes he's talking to her. Sometimes she's not, stuff like that. And then Longest Journey, which I also discussed on the Heavy Rain postmortem, is it's my favorite game story ever. It fits the adventure game model perfectly. It's just great writing all around. Longest Journey was.
If I could kind of jump in a little bit and touch on some of the things that Richard brought up. I mean, I definitely agree that people in the industry right now, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone, because it's not like I'm sitting here saying I could make a better game, although I definitely do think I could write a better story, that's for sure. But they do need to kind of change the way that they look at the way stories are implemented. I mean, it's exactly like Richard said. Most often games are framed in terms of gameplay, game aesthetics, game design, game mechanics. I mean, and those are all well and good, and they're all very, very important. But at the same time, I really don't see that any of those things has to trump or push aside story. I mean, I don't see why story has to take such a big back seat, because honestly, speaking from personal experience, I know that writers don't make that much money, so it doesn't really cost that much to hire a writer. And I realize that, there's it's more than just having a writer and incorporating that into your game. But it's really disappointing to me to see that so many developers treat it as an afterthought. And I think that if they did take a little more time to really craft a quality story, it wouldn't have to override the gameplay, but it would only supplement it. I mean, if you make a really delicious hamburger's great, but if the bun is like moldy and rotten, like it kind of takes away from the entire burger, right? I mean, the burger is still good, but you're not going to enjoy it as much as you could if the bun was like really nice and toasted and has sesame seeds. So why don't we continue to make great, burgers like we've been doing, and let's just put a little bit more attention on the bun.
I think in a lot of situations, the writer comes in after the game is well into the design phase. And I know that at Valve, the policy is for the writer of the game to be in the room with the developer in the design sessions from day one. And that process resulted in what I think is the game that has the best story from the last 3 years or so, and that is Portal, which was written by Eric Wolpaw. And that is a game about essentially two characters, a test subject and a mad computer. And what works so well for me in that game is not just the writing, which is hilarious, and the computer's sort of descent into madness as the game passes on, but also the elements of story that are built into the environment, that are built into the game itself. The notes that you find scratched into the wall by prior test subjects that are warning you that there's more to what's going on than meets the eye. It really helps build the mystery. And I think Valve is it's a master. They're masters at that. And that policy of having that writer in the room from minute one works really well for them. Half-Life 2 is a game that does that tremendously well. And I know, Richard, you didn't care for it as much as I do, story-wise. But really, the entire story of what happens between Half-Life and Half-Life 2 is right there built into the world if you look around. And to me, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for not just a story to be told in cutscenes and dialogue, but to have it built into that world that I'm playing in.
I do agree with the Valve philosophy of having writers, on the ground from step one. I totally am down with that. I don't think that actually, for me anyway, that they are the best storytellers. I don't really particularly care for the way they tell their stories, but I do recognize their attempt, and I think it's a really valid one. I mean, to me, that's a really great way of telling a story in an immersive, kind of nonverbal fashion. It doesn't really work for me that well in their games, because I think to have kind of a mute protagonist and to have a lot of events which need to be strung together. I mean, like Tim said, you kind of have to connect the dots. And for whatever reason in those games, I just didn't really care to. But in other games, I do. I mean, I think that style of storytelling is certainly valid. I don't mean to say that it's not. I mean, my example of something of that nature would probably be closer to something like Eco, where the story of the game is there, kind of like you guys have been talking about. But it's up to the player to kind of make inferences and to kind of, absorb it from the environment. I mean, in Eco, I think there's like maybe 2 or 3 lines of dialogue in the whole game. I mean, there's barely anything. So there's not a lot of text. There's no cutscenes. But to the player who pays attention and just goes along with the game and really looks at what the developers have crafted, I mean, there's a really rich story to be told there. It just is simply not told via cutscenes or text.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that technique worked really well in Portal. I totally got what you were saying there with Tim, with the stuff that's scrawled on the walls, all the little the radios and everything else that's left around the lab. I want to say it worked fairly well in Shadow of the Colossus. It kind of tailed off near the end, but it did go pretty good in that game as well. Not so much in Half-Life or Half-Life 2. I'm sorry. Just because, for the reasons I said in that article and the reasons I just said, but I totally understand that concept of just sort of telling the story through the environment, so to speak, without words.
Yeah, it's interesting you guys frame this topic in the context of the structure and setting and the setting. When I think of storytelling or writing, I tend to think of characters, and that's what sort of struck me more about this whole topic. And the first thing that comes to mind for me that in the earliest days, in playing on the PlayStation was this character Jose Estrada from Front Mission 3. Do you guys remember that?
I remember not liking Front Mission, but I don't remember Jose. Sorry.
He was a character. The background story of him really struck me. I mean, I don't know how it holds up, and I don't know how overall the game holds up because it's been quite a few years. But I always remember that character because I think one of the weaknesses of game storytelling and game characters in general is they tend to just be caricatures. I mean, they take sort of like, the characters we've seen in movies and books, and they just transfer it over to games, and they think that's enough. They very often do not apply very good background stories, motivations, histories, and that sort of thing. They just, it's a tough guy, or he's the, ignorant sounding Ebonics guy from like Final Fantasy VII. I'm thinking of
Barrett.
Exactly. Why is he that way? It doesn't matter. He's black, and that's good enough for video games, and unfortunately that's offensive for a lot of other people.
They say you didn't watch Advent Children. It was way worse than that.
Yeah, I mean, I hate Final Fantasy VII for a lot of these reasons, and everything that goes with Final Fantasy VII. I know this is shocking to people who grew up on Final Fantasy VII. Let's not get too distracted here. Anyway, going back to Front Mission 3, what I loved about this character, I mean, it was just completely different take on it, and it was really, unfortunately, very sad. I mean, what happened was that the character, his wife and child had died as part of a military accident that he was involved with, and he was just sort of filled with regret after that. I don't remember too many more details beyond that, but it just wasn't sort of your typical, again, stereotype or caricature. And on top of the fact that he was also a Filipino, which you didn't see too many. Even today, there's still not too many Filipino video game characters out there.
He must be the only one, man, because I can't even name one.
Yeah. Then because the whole game a large part of it took place in the Philippines, and there were like two different characters that were major characters that were Filipino. So just again, interesting nationality, unique backstory, and it was really sad and tragic, and it always stuck with me. And it was only one particular character in that game. Later on, I would say the two games that stand out in my mind are Way of the Samurai and one that you've already talked about, Richard, Dragon Age Origins, and it's not a long list. I mean, I got to say, it's not a long list because like Richard was saying about Heavy Rain, and for me, it's Uncharted 2. People throw certain things up on the screen, and just because it sort of sounds like good writing or it's progressive, people automatically assume that it's just brilliant. And there's just some basic storytelling 101 things going on for me that you have to sort of like understand the plight of the character. You have to understand why they're trying, what's their motivation. And yeah, going back to Dragon Age, that just had it in spades. I mean, I can't think of a more perfect character than Morrigan. Actually, she's probably going to go down in history as one of my favorite characters ever. I mean, she's not like sympathetic, she's completely arrogant and cocky, and you understand why. She's like, she's been raised by this, omnipotent witch, and she's isolated, in this forest, and she's very powerful, and she's hot, smoking hot, so it all kind of makes sense, And she goes out there and she's just sort of like abrasive and and at the same time still has her moments of growth and development. So
yeah. That's actually what got me the most about. I mean, I have not played Uncharted 2, so I can't comment on that. But that's what got me the most about the Dragon Age characters, and not just Morrigan. I mean, really, several of them, they will change and they will adapt based on what you do with them. I mean, especially Morrigan. I mean, Morrigan will, will actually admit to, having feelings and, so on and so forth. And especially if you complete her romance subplot.
Right.
And then there's, some of the others. You can actually get Leliana to renounce her faith. If you do a lot of her stuff. There's several others. You can actually make Zevran into a very emotional character. And, at the very beginning when you meet him, he's like, this cold-hearted assassin. It's like, yeah, I might die, whatever. But,
what I was going to say... Sorry, go ahead. Finish.
Oh no, I was going to say it's like he will actually change quite a bit if you complete his if you complete a lot of his conversation trees and all that.
All right. What I was going to say was that the best part about it is that none of it comes out forced. And it's kind of ironic because, as you say, you make it happen, so it sounds like it's automatically forced, but it's not. And I think that one of the game series out there that gets the most credit for like being the story game series is Final Fantasy. And one thing I never get over about Final Fantasy is that everything is forced. It's like everything is just completely stereotyped, and they're all caricatures, and like, oh, this person's gonna die, so then and it's gonna make that traumatize that person and give them angst and drama and what I love about Dragon Age is that it just all comes off pretty, despite the fact that a lot of it's player initiated, but it still comes out completely organic and completely believable, and that's what I loved about it. And it's sort of the same way for me for Way of the Samurai too. I mean, it's one of the few games out there. Again, every single character has sort of like their own unique ambitions, their own unique motivations, which fits well with the gameplay because with the original concept of Way of the Samurai before it hit Part 3 was that the game would sort of play itself if you chose not to do anything, and that the characters have to have that sort of level of detail, I guess. But those are the two games to me that stand out as examples of great characters and good storytelling.
A little disappointed, Chi, that you didn't bring up Wing Commander.
Good, interesting you say that. Do you want to hear me hear my reasons why, or do you want to talk about Wing Commander first?
No, I want to hear your reasons why you didn't bring it up.
I love Wing Commander to death, as you know, probably just as much as you do, or maybe a little less, because I know you're the biggest Wing Commander fan out there. The only reason I didn't cite Wing Commander was it was such in the early stages of PC gaming, and they were starting just to develop some great characters there. But I didn't find that they had great background motivations. I mean, they had personalities that were better than most caricatures, and maybe I'm going to recant that because as I'm talking about that, I kind of remember Spirit Tanaka having like this long history. She's the one that kind of stands out, right? Like as far as having that like that generations or something like that of
that was gonna be my counter argument was Spirit and her story that kind of evolves through the two games and then culminating in her sort of noble sacrifice to and I can't remember the exact details, but I know she sacrifices her life in an epic mission cutscene, and that kind of propels the plot in a different direction as she inspires you to greatness. But I guess those Ninja Gaiden type cutscenes just don't do it for me as far as really believability. I mean, it was great for its time, and I love those games, but just not the same effect as sort of Dragon Age and Way of the Samurai. Sorry, go ahead.
Jump in here, you guys, real quick. I mean, it sounds to me like, not to get kind of bogged down in the details, but it sounds like the common thread between all the things that you guys just name-checked was that the writers of all of those projects really took the time to kind of connect on at least, a small level of humanity. Like it was not just a caricature, but I mean, these characters had little bits of humanity that a player could connect with on a personal level. I mean, I found that to be very true in Dragon Age. I found that to be very true in the first Mass Effect, and even in some parts of Mass Effect 2. I mean, I think all the best games that really succeed in that kind of storytelling just take a step back and they realize that it's possible to add little bits of humanity in addition to having really solid gameplay. Like the two things are not mutually exclusive. I think that even Gears of War, which I think is really derided as being kind of this macho, balls-out testosterone fest, in Gears of War 2, even though that game had its own issues, I really thought that the big scene, I don't know if it's too soon to spoil it or whatever, but when Dom, the secondary character, gets his big revelation in the middle of Gears of War 2. Like, just
spoil it, dude. Just spoil it, because
are you sure?
I haven't even played the game yet, and it's already been spoiled for me because you just can't avoid it.
Okay. So anyway, so what happens is in this game, Dom, the secondary character, is looking for his wife, and so a large part of the game they're talking about, we got to do these missions, we got to do X, Y, Z, but if we get the chance, let's look around for my wife. Maybe I'll find her, maybe I won't, whatever. He's a soldier, he's rough, he's tough. But when they finally do catch up to his wife, even though I didn't feel like it was really done all that well, I really admired the fact that they even tried. And to me, that was a step in the right direction. I mean, you can criticize Gears of War for lots of things, and even I've done it myself. But I do want to give them props. And one of the things that I really thought was the best about that particular scene was when you finally do find Dom's wife, and you see her. She comes out of this containment jar prison thing, and she looks beautiful. Like, she looks like she's fully dressed. She's got, like, her hair is really great. And I remember looking at that thinking, what are they doing? How is she looking so beautiful? She's in this prison underground and there's monsters. What's going on? And in like the very next sequence, you see her as she actually is, which is she's totally scarred, she's bloody, she's beaten. And for them to even think about showing her the way that Dom would see her after missing her for so long, to me really captured a really special part of who that character could have been and kind of was. And so I think if more developers took the time, I mean, if you can do a little bit of romantic emotion in Gears of War, you can do it in any game as far as I'm concerned. You know, you can at least make the attempt. And I think that really just not enough games really even make the attempt. It's not hard to add humanity wherever you can. And I really wish that people would do that more.
Just to kind of piggyback on top of that, it's like as far as I mean, it is good that they would make the attempt like something like that. But I mean, this gets it back to some of the reason why I didn't understand why Heavy Rain got accolades for great storytelling. It's like the fact that they attempted to tell this this great mystery story about this this dad doing anything to save his son, or why some other games there's an attempt to have an epic story, but it's like you can attempt to have an epic story, fine, but I mean it's not good, and if it's not good, then it's not good still.
Oh, I totally agree.
An attempt does not make good.
Well, right. No, I mean, I agree, but I think the difference between Heavy Rain and Gears of War, which is a pretty important difference, is that with Gears of War, I don't think anybody expected anything besides lots of running and shooting. And so for me, the fact that they tried to even get that little bit in there, to me, really showed to me like they were trying to step up their game, which was really appreciated. But with something like Heavy Rain, I mean, that game was built, conceived, advertised. I mean, that game lived and died on the fact that it was, quote unquote, cinematic and rich with story, and that it told this emotional tale. And so for a game to position itself like that, and then to drop the ball as often and as thoroughly and as hard as they did, was like, I mean, that was, I think, why everybody hammered it so hard, was it was like, if you tell everybody in the world you're the best dancer and you get up and you got two left feet, well, then you're just, you look like an ass. And so for a game like, I mean, for Gears, for them to do that a little bit with Dom's wife, I'm giving them props, which was great because nobody expected anything but bullets. But with Heavy Rain, I think we all expected at least a serviceable story, and that game has so many plot holes and problems. I mean, you cannot take it seriously.
Brad, I'm looking at your top 10 of all time, and you have to have some story thoughts on your number one game, Snatcher.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to bring up Snatcher as an example of old school kind of storytelling. I think we've kind of changed modalities in certain ways. I mean, like you guys were talking about with Half-Life, the kind of immersive, nonverbal storytelling is kind of a newer thing that's only been possible due to, advanced technology and more detail in environments and stuff, which I think is great. But, back in the day, you couldn't really do that all that much. And so you really had to rely on just really good cutscenes, clever writing, to stand out from the crowd. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, Snatcher is one of Hideo Kojima's earliest works, if actually not his earliest work. I mean, I'm sure he's done smaller things before that, but and I'm sure we're going to get emails saying, "What are you doing? You don't know nothing about games. That was not it." But okay, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I believe that Snatcher was his first really big budget project, and that was a very traditional kind of graphic adventure where the game, just like Heavy Rain, lived and died on its story. If the story in Snatcher would not have been good, it wouldn't have really went anywhere. But it did. I mean, the characters, I thought for the time, were extremely well done, really well rounded. They had little bits of humanity, little bits of humor in between the action and the horror, and there were lots of little clever bits that you could come across. And so it showed to me that the developers, Kojima and the rest of his team, really did take the time to craft these characters as more than just stereotypes or caricatures. And I mean, part of my keeping it at number one is, of course, nostalgia for those bygone days. But I actually did play it again not too long ago, and I was really impressed with how well it held up. I mean, if you take out of the equation, like, the technical aspects that don't hold up so much, like the voice work and the writing and just the craft of the storytelling itself, traditional, old school, non-interactive, director telling you what he wants you to see storytelling, like, it was all really, really well done. And in fact, I would hold that up as probably superior to anything that Kojima has done since, including the entire Metal Gear series. So if anybody gets the chance, I would definitely recommend that as a great example of old school storytelling.
Did you dig up your old Sega CD to play that?
I did a couple years ago.
Oh,
I was moving, and I came across the box that it was in, and I hadn't seen it in like years and years, and I'm like, oh my god, I hope it still works. And it worked, and I was like, okay, I'm going to play it one more time, because if I play it two more times, it's going to break, and I don't want it to be broken, so I'm going to play it just one more time. And man, it really held up. It was really cool. So I love Snatcher. I totally wish they would re-release that. It so desperately needs to be re-released. I'm really sad that it hasn't been more widely available.
Tim, I'm actually kind of disappointed that you didn't go on a little further, or I'm disappointed by your general counter for Wing Commander. Like, expected more out of you there. Did we cut you off short there, or was there more to the argument, or if you had to just frame it as how you would frame it, what was your big thing? I mean, we didn't even get into 3 and 4.
For me, in the early 90s, the promise of games as movies was something I really bought into. So when I saw, for example, the first footage of Rebel Assault, if you remember the old Star Wars CD-ROM games, that was something that I was entranced by. And the idea that I could have an interactive movie, full motion video, all that stuff I completely bought into. Just as as a technologist, and to be able to see something like that on a computer screen. But for me, Wing Commander 2 was, which I know predates the full motion video, which didn't come till 3. But for me, Wing Commander 2, which still had maintained the sort of open mission structure of the first game. You could still fail. You could still lose the campaign, but it brought more scripted characters, more cinematic moments that, to me, I found more compelling than the first game. And I was going to give the example of Spirit. If you lost a wingman in the first game, people might have mentioned them once, and then you'd never hear about them again. But they died because you didn't play the game well enough. To me, that wasn't as impactful as Wing 2, where a character would die as a result of something scripted. Like I said, Spirit's motivation, Jazz turns out to be a traitor, and you end up foiling his plans to sabotage the fleet, and you find redemption. And the story was just more epic, I think, because it was scripted. It was just infused with drama.
But let me ask you this, and I think this is where we will start to disagree with Wing Commander 2 here, is, do you think the story in general holds up?
I think the story of Christopher Blair, that he had been branded a traitor, that he lost his standing in the fleet, and that he was stationed on some backwater mining station for 10 years, to me, that was a huge deal. Coming down from Wing Commander, coming to Wing Commander 2, and the story of his redemption was a much more personal story that I connected to more than the more, frankly, generic space war battle against an alien race story in the first game.
Interesting.
It was just a grander story, but also a more personal one. And a lot of that had to do with the technology. I mean, in the first game, you were only on the Tiger's Claw. And in the second game, you were going from station to station, from capital ship to capital ship, based mostly around the Concordia. But it was just a bigger game. They could put more characters in and more more locations, more ship types. It was just more epic.
Yeah, just to kind of jump in here, Tim, I felt kind of almost the exact same way about Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2. Because remember in the original Dark Forces, it's like, you're Kyle Katarn, and then there's like, robot stormtroopers, and that's basically it. There's no real story. When I started seeing some of the previews for the second game, Jedi Knight, it's like, they said they were going to have, live action video sequences. There was going to be this story arc about Katarn's father, and there was just going to be like these 7 Dark Jedis you were going to fight. I'm like, man, this is going to have an awesome story. I couldn't wait to get into it. And then like, the live action stuff was so awful. Like, it was just so poorly acted, and it was just bleh. Like, it was terrible. Like, think about, Phantom Menace, the prequels and stuff like that. It was actually a little bit worse than that.
Yeah.
Like, it was terrible.
You know, the only game that really lived up to full motion video, the promise of full motion video in my mind, were the Wing Commander games, 3 and 4, and I didn't care for the 5th one, but 3 and 4 were the only games that really, to me, captured the potential, and that's just because they threw so much money at it that they were the best looking games. And if you go back and watch Wing Commander 4, there are a lot of big name actors, not just Mark Hamill, but Casper Van Dien from Starship Troopers. That's a big name.
Oscar-winning Casper Van Dien.
Oscar-winning Casper Van Dien. A couple West Wing cast members can be found in there. So that's an acting masterclass, my friends.
Yeah. Well, you guys, if I can kind of just hijack the conversational thread here and jump ahead like 20 years.
Wait, can I? Wait, I wanted to counter his thing for the Wing Commander thing. Can I just?
All right, one more thing about Wing Commander, and then we're done with this stuff.
I forget. Brad doesn't like old games.
Forever,
yeah. I play the old games, just not those ones. But anyway, do your Wing Commander bit. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah. So I think Tim, where you and I differ with the Wing Commander 1 and 2 is I think the plot for Wing Commander 1, while primitive, is nicely understated, I'll say, and organic. I wouldn't call it. It's generic in its typically. Again, I don't think it's generic. I think it's just understated. It's not meant to have sort of these epic plot twists. And my issue with Wing Commander 2 is, I respect what you're saying with that, but for me, it was quite honestly, it was kind of a little bit forced. The whole, he's a traitor, and this guy's, the double agent, and then somebody has to die, and it's a happy ending, and redemption. That all kind of felt a little too, heavy-handed to me.
Yeah.
But that's my take. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely can see where you're coming from there. Yeah. I think part of it as well was just the presentation of that game with the first, for me, it was my first game with a speech sound card. So I'm hearing all of the dialogue played back for me, and it really just put me into that game. And I will probably be in my top 10 for the rest of my life. Okay, Brad, we're done.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
One more.
Go.
Okay, one more.
As for 3 and 4, I remember turning on the cheat code for both of those games and just completely ignoring the flight parts just to watch the full motion video sequences and to get the story. I was not crazy about the gameplay, and I think my computer couldn't handle the polygons as well at the time, so that didn't help either. But I wasn't crazy about the flight engine at that point either. But I will say this, and it's kind of a compliment to those two games. I don't think they were great stories, but like I said, to its credit, I wanted to see what happened, and I think they held up okay. I don't think they're. We wouldn't consider them masterpieces today, but there certainly were interesting contributions, and I think they actually, like you said, they did full motion video justice in a lot of ways. So that's it for me on Wing Commander.
At the time, there was nothing of that scale and budget on the market, and they really stood out for that reason. But you're right, not great, amazing stories, but still, you go watch those clips on YouTube, they're still totally watchable. So.
I will do that.
And Tim, just to kind of jump on what you were saying with, it was about how much more impactful it was to hear the dialogue actually spoken. I can't remember. I think you were talking about Wing Commander 2, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, for me, that was, and aside from Dark Forces 2, and for me, that was TIE Fighter.
Yeah.
And, just to sort of reveal my inner Star Wars geek here, but for me, it's like the big sell of actually the dialogue in that game was I actually got to hear Grand Admiral Thrawn talk. I'm like, man, this guy's going to have an awesome voice. And then he sounded like some alcoholic you would run into at a bar at like 3 a.m.
I was going to say, Thrawn was really unimpressive in that game.
I know. His voice was awful. And he made all kinds of terrible tactical decisions, too. I'm like, wow, this is bad.
Yeah. Anyway, we digress. Brad, take it.
You guys done?
We're done. Go ahead.
No, wait. I want to mention more. I want to talk about the TIE Defender, the best starfighter ever. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
God. Oh, my God. All right. Okay, so trying to get this thing back on track for people who have not played those games, myself included.
Hey, a lot of people play those games, but anyway,
a lot of people play those games, which is great, and I'm all for that. But I kind of want to bring it up like to a kind of a higher level and continue the thread that you guys started. I mean, number one, you guys mentioned budget, which I think is really important. Number two, Richard just mentioned voice acting, which I think is really important also. And the third thing is the kind of scripted storytelling that Tim mentioned. I mean, we've already talked about the immersive storytelling, like in Half-Life and Eco. I mentioned old school storytelling, like in Snatcher, where the player had, no say in what happened whatsoever. But in talking about kind of a more modern type of scripting, I mean, I think probably a good example of kind of blending those things is the first Mass Effect, and to a lesser degree, Mass Effect 2. I mean, I don't want this to be like the BioWare cheerleading show, but it seemed to me that when Tim was talking about the epic moments that were scripted, I kind of felt the exact same thing. In a lot of like the end segments of Mass Effect, once events start going, you don't have a lot of say in what happens. I mean, you have your say over your team and over certain decisions, but the larger like action-packed decisions, a lot of those things are scripted. And when those things start coming in, like you really get a great sense of action. Like you really feel like you get swept up in what's going on. The energy level gets really ramped up. I mean, the same thing for the end of Mass Effect 2, which I think a lot of that game was a snorer. But when you finally get to the end mission, you got all your team together and you start going through the enemy base or whatever it is, and then all of a sudden, like, these scripted events start happening and things start popping. Like, it really shows the power of what good writing can do, good scripting even. I know a lot of people these days are kind of rebelling against scripting and saying, oh, no, we need to have emergent freeform gameplay which has no rules, and we need to have sandbox design where I, the player, get to make all the decisions, which is valid to a certain point, but I don't think that it negates the scripting type of philosophy. I mean, that's the way that books are, that's the way that movies are, and I think that games are really lucky because we can have great scripting in addition to letting the player have a certain degree of choice. I mean, do you guys feel that, like for example, Mass Effect, I mean, I think all of us have played that. Chi, did you play Mass Effect 1?
I started playing it, but I didn't get past like 15 hours, I think.
Okay, but Tim and Richard, you guys have, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that game has budget, it has really awesome voice acting, and it has really awesome scripting. And so, I mean, do you guys think that the way that game approaches storytelling is just as valid as the other ones we've discussed? Do you like it more, less? I mean, why not? What do you think about that?
I think that, and just to sort of compare and contrast that with, I guess, Knights of the Old Republic, which does have a little bit more response to player choice, because, I mean, the ending is totally different depending on, what side you choose, whereas in Mass Effect, the ending is always the same. It's just a matter of, like, a bunch of little minute details, like who is alive, who isn't, what sort of stature do you have at the end, stuff like that.
Right.
I think that scripting or scripted stories can be great, especially just because, sometimes, I mean, it's kind of like how Dan was talking about on the Heavy Rain postmortem. It's hard to come up with a story that works within the confines of a game a lot of the time, and trying to do that and take into account player choice, and it's like, this can happen, this can happen, this can happen, and then the game has to respond, all this other stuff can be insanely difficult from a writing standpoint. And so, I mean, that's the value where I see is having a scripted story can be like, what, we're not gonna try to do all this stuff here. We're just going to have a scripted story, have it be good, have it hopefully be good, and then be done with it, and then it'll be fine. I mean, obviously there are ways where, you can have that sort of freeform thing, like, Dragon Age. There's a lot of response to player choice. Mass Effect obviously does. Can't think of any other examples off the top of my head right now. But then there's also great examples of scripted ones, like, Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, Aquaria, like I was mentioning. Wing Commander 2, as Tim talked about. I haven't played any of the Wing Commander games either, but I'll just take his word for it. Just stuff like this. So I think both can work under the correct circumstances, but having a story that responds to player initiative, at least on the level of something like Dragon Age, is a much larger investment of development time and development resources.
I would agree with that. I mean, yeah. I totally agree. But I think that, I mean, to me, in my mind, the difference, I mean, taking the choice out of it for just a moment, just simply having a good story that has a beginning, middle, and end that holds up is not really that tough to me. And, okay, granted, I haven't made a game, I'm not a developer, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I mean, reading as much as I have, writing as much as I have, taking in as much media as I have, there are certain tenets to storytelling that I think if more developers adhered to, even if they chose to go the completely scripted route, I think that a lot of games could have pretty fantastic stories. I mean, are you guys on board with that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that 100%, Brad. I mean, I think, unfortunately, though, it's so rare we see that in video games. And I think the prior king to scripted video games has always been Final Fantasy, right? I mean, it's always been its one moniker. But I think the title rightfully belongs to BioWare, if you ask me. I think they definitely are doing it in much more progressive and interesting, and in a lot of ways, sometimes more interactive ways when it came to Dragon Age. So, yeah, I'm totally with you there, Brad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's been a Final Fantasy with a logical through line, beginning, middle, and end. It's probably Final Fantasy VI. I mean, that's the thing about Final Fantasy. You get really, you can make the argument about Final Fantasy and Grand Theft Auto, and that is the stories become incomprehensible halfway to 3/4 of the way through the game. It just
they started going awry with already 6 because that had one of the worst endings in video game history, where basically there was no ending because they just didn't know what the fuck to do with any of these characters.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying, Brad, about it not being too difficult, the storytelling rather not being too difficult. I'm always reminded these days of the epic 10-part YouTube review of episode 1 that came out I think later in 2009.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and that review perfectly encapsulated it's not that hard, or not that it's not so hard, but it's been done. Making a decent, good classic story, it's been done to death to the point where if you just follow these simple steps, you should be able to do it. So it's not hard in that regard, and yet it just baffles the mind how people screw it up time and time and time again.
Oh, exactly. I mean, we've got I don't even know how many years worth of literature. I mean, game developers could pick any decent book, simply copy the plot points, point for point, and you'd have a good story there. Like you said, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's simply following what people have done for decades. I mean, I'm not even going to talk about, originality and creativity. I'm saying we need to just get people down with the basics. And once they've got the basics, then they can start getting all crazy with it. But we're not even to the basics level in most instances. It's pretty embarrassing, actually.
So I think we're all in agreement that it would be a rare, if not impossible, scenario where a good story would harm a game. A good story can make any game, I think no matter what the game is, better.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like I was saying before, it's like, God of War, the story's not very good, but doesn't really matter. Whereas Heavy Rain, the story's terrible, and it makes the game bad for it.
I'm always reminded of Dead to Rights, a game that I proclaimed as a great E3 looking game, and then when it came out, the story was so bad that I did a complete 180 and just hammered that game to pieces because the story was just horrible.
Yeah. Well, it's like you said, Tim. I mean, a great game with great mechanics and great play will still be a great game, but there's no game out there that wouldn't be better by having, if they choose to incorporate story elements, by making that story a quality story. There is nothing taken away by spending time on having memorable characters, dramatic events, and exciting action. I mean, it's only a positive.
It's just some icing on the cake.
Exactly. And if you're going to bake a cake anyway, don't we usually put frosting on them? I think we do.
I don't. I generally don't like frosting on them.
Contrarian.
No, seriously, I don't like frosting on them.
Gets in your mustache.
Yes, it does, actually.
I gotta say, I don't like the cake metaphor, the icing cake metaphor, because the cake can do without the icing, like as you said. And we were talking about it earlier as being a sort of a more unique concoction where it's more of a balance issue, where sometimes it could, what were you using, Brad? It was the hamburger thing in the bun.
Yeah, burger and bun.
I think that's a little better for me. Not an ingenious metaphor, but I think that works better than the cake and icing for me.
Oh, so now my metaphors are no good now. I see how it is. It's not ingenious. Thanks,
I was going to say, we can just come up with some type of food dish and then invent a topping for it and then call that the story. It's like, oh, this is the anchovies on the pizza, or something ridiculous like that.
I don't really care for anchovies. I don't know if that works for me. But anyway, I think the takeaway from all this is that the point is, no matter how solid the core you're building on, it can only be better by making sure that the other elements are equally as well done.
And that's what I think we'll end on tonight. Folks, did you enjoy the show? Frankly, I have no idea if you enjoyed the show or not. But you know how you could tell us? Leave your feedback at GameCritics.com. You'll usually find the latest show pinned to the top of the homepage. Remember also that the show is available through iTunes and the Zune Marketplace. Leave us some reviews. Tell the world about us. We're trying to increase our celebrity. Really, that's the only reason we're doing this, I think, is the fame. Final words. Richard, any last thoughts?
I think that over all of our disagreements, or over anything we might have to say, I think that we can all agree on the fact that Grand Admiral Thrawn had a terrible voice in TIE Fighter.
I certainly cannot deny it. Brad, what about you?
I would just like to say that if the industry put as much attention on telling a decent story as it did on particle effects and the latest bells and whistles, I think that would be something really to tell my grandkids about.
Hear, hear. And she will give you the last word.
Sure. Similar to what Brad just said, in preparing for this show, I sort of went through all the games that that I had played throughout history, really, and looking at all the reviews. And to be quite honest, it was like I didn't find a lot of games in there that had a great story, so that was kind of like shocking. And like Brad said, I would love to be able to see more games in there where I can honestly praise the stories. We picked out a few good ones, but I think there could definitely be a lot more.
I browsed my game shelf as we were talking there, looking for another game to talk about in terms of story, and nothing. So I'm right there with you, Chi. I'm right there with you. All right, that's it. We are done. We want to thank you for listening. I'm Tim Spaeth. It's been a pleasure. Good night and bon chance. Oh my God.
Oh, but how many emails are we going to get about this being like, dude, were you guys just like hammered that whole time? Wow.
Man.
Man, Brad, you bring it like every time, man. You're like Simon Cowell, man.
Oh my God. Well, I do love Simon, but still, I mean, it's for someone to say that they're too well read to know about video games, like, fuck you, dude. Fuck you. You know what I'm saying? Like we're all illiterate fucks, like picking our asses and playing games. Give me a break.
It's kind of hard to pick your ass and play games at the same time.
That's what I'm saying. It's only one or the other, right?
I know.
Oh, man.